Many of you are no doubt aware of Noam Chomsky. He's a philosopher, linguist, and political commentator with a literary output rivaling that of Aristotle, and he's decided to weigh in and comment on this ventilator shortage and the coronavirus crisis in general. He says that the ventilator shortage exposes the cruelty of neoliberal capitalism. So let's take a look and see what he has to say. I'm going to make it bigger for you so you can read some of the text here. So I'm just going to show you this, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. So Chomsky here says that the scale of the problem is surprising and indeed shocking, but its appearance and how it's coming about is not surprising. It's not surprising that the U.S. has the worst record in regards to responding to the crisis. Scientists have been warning of a pandemic for years, insistently so, since the SARS epidemic of 2003, which was also caused by a coronavirus moving through here. He says that that was the time to begin putting in place a rapid response system in preparation for an outbreak and to set aside spare capacity that would be needed. Initiatives could have also been undertaken to develop defense and modes of treatment for a likely reoccurrence of a related virus. But scientific understanding is not enough. There also needs to be someone to pick up the ball and run with it. That option was barred by the pathology of the contemporary socioeconomic order. Market signals were clear. There is no profit in preventing a future catastrophe. The government could have stepped in, but that's barred by the reigning doctrine. Government is the problem, as Reagan told us, with a sunny smile, meaning that decision-making had to be handed over even more fully to the business world, which is devoted to private profit and is free from influence from those who might be concerned with the common good. The years that followed injected a dose of neoliberal brutality to the unconstrained capitalist order and the twisted forms of market it constructs. The depth of the pathology is revealed clearly by one of the most dramatic and murderous failures. Guys, this is really, really crazy here, so listen up to this part here. The lack of ventilators is that one the lack of ventilators that is one of the major bottlenecks confronting the pandemic. The Department of Health and Human Services foresaw the problem and contracted with a small firm to produce inexpensive, easy-to-use ventilators, but then capitalist logic intervened. The firm was bought by a major corporation, Covidian, which sidelined the project, and in 2014 came out and said, with no ventilators in hand, they said that with no ventilators having been delivered to the government, Covidian executives told officials at the Federal Biomedical Research Agency that they wanted to get out of the contract. According to 3 former federal officials, the company explained that it was not sufficiently profitable to produce these ventilators, and that is no doubt true. Neoliberal logic intervened, dictating that the government could not act to overcome the gross market failure, which is now causing havoc. As the New York Times put it quite gently, the stalled effort to create a new class of cheap and easy-to-use ventilators highlights the perils of outsourcing projects with critical public health implications to private companies. Their focus on maximizing profit is not always consistent with the government's goal of preparing for a future crisis. And guys, this is a really good point to make. I'm so glad that Noam Chomsky is out here making it, is because it's becoming super, super clear that when it comes to this coronavirus crisis, we were not only unprepared logistically and strategically for this crisis, we were also unprepared morally and philosophically. We had this reigning doctrine of neoliberalism, which made it so that when we talk about the common good, we are talking about economic values for capitalism, right? When we discuss, what is for the common good, it means we're talking about the economy, and the economy in a certain kind of order, in a certain kind of structure. And this led to, and is currently leading to, a situation where we're having a really, really hard time allocating resources. We're having a really, really hard time figuring out who should get which resources and where, how should we actually produce these resources. We're dealing with situations where 3M is trying to basically overcharge for the production of masks, because right now what we're dealing with is states paying roughly 10 or 15 times the average cost of medical supplies in order to, get them to their state, in order to get them where they need to go here in America, because everyone is bidding them up. If you ask me, I think that there should be a select committee for Congress, like they did in the Truman administration with the Korean War, and basically drag these executives. And look, guys, before I get further, I understand that, it might cost a little bit more during a time of crisis because, everybody's bidding for them, and that's what happened. But we cannot let it be 10 or 15 times the cost. That's insane. Guys, it's unbelievable and it's unconscionable. So Congress needs to have a select committee, drag these executives in front and look at them and say, look, if I find out that you are charging me a penny more for these masks than it costs you to make, then guess what? You're done. You're going to jail for the rest of your life. Because what needs to be done is we need to implement the Defense Production Act, and these companies need to be producing medical supplies at cost for these for the situation at hand. But neoliberal logic is leading to a situation where these companies are outsourcing all of these resources to other countries, outsourcing all kinds of ventilator production, as Noam Chomsky was talking about there, and it's leading to a complete disaster, a complete meltdown of not just our medical system as it relates to having a for-profit healthcare system, which is tied to employment, where we have 3.3 million people going on uninsurance last week, and in this week it's been 6.6 million. So we have something near 10 million people going on uninsurance going for unemployment, many of whom are now losing their insurance in the middle of a pandemic. So we have multiple crises happening here, and Noam Chomsky is right to focus the blame not just on the for-profit healthcare system, but on neoliberal market logic itself. And I think that his criticism here is quite apt, and we're seeing this sort of debate filter into the more public we might say more public discourse where it regards this. So here was Sagar and Jetty here today. Let me make it a little bit bigger for you. Sagar and Jetty saying, this may shock you people, namely those in Washington and nonprofits and people on Twitter, but the role of the country is to look out for its citizens. And this is responding to these reports that basically the United States is hijacking or diverting supplies to itself and to other country and away from other countries. Now, whatever you think about this particular debate and whatever Sagar's opinion of it, it is clear now that on both the left and the right, we are now rethinking capitalist or at least neoliberal logic and rethinking how supplies should be allocated. Because what you'll notice is on the right, there's a certain debate, which, as Sagar is kind of a right sort of leaning populist, he's arguing that these companies have a public interest towards America, towards, putting America first in some sense. Guys, you can criticize that and think, well, no, these other countries need to go, the resources need to go everywhere and, have a, people should be treated equally, essentially. You can criticize that. But the point that is important here is that even on the right, we are seeing criticism of the idea that free trade should reign, because in many respects, neoliberalism is the ideology that we should offload critical and very important sort of moral and ethical considerations to the market. If I can't make a clear, informed decision on how we should, allocate some resource, allocate some good, or, think about the public good, et cetera, we should offload that question to the market. Because the idea, again, as I was talking about earlier, the idea of neoliberalism, at least partially, is the thought that the economy is the sort of public. The economy is the common good. The economy is society, right? We're homo economicus. And so when we talk about actually rethinking companies, rethinking the way that companies should allocate resources towards the home, again, you can criticize the nationalist element of it. I'm skeptical of it too. But at least we are seeing a legitimate criticism coming from the right towards neoliberalism. So I'm at least happy to that extent, right? And so I really think that Noam Chomsky is absolutely right on multiple levels, not just in terms of factually being right, giving a good critique, but also right about the mood of the moment. Because also what we're seeing right here with this coronavirus thing is, I think after this crisis, things are going to be very, very different in this country. Because right now, all of our institutions, all of our, it's going to be judged that nations, institutions, even ideologies and ideas about the world are going to be judged as having failed. Ideologies, the way we think about the world, will have been thought to have failed. Institutions will have been thought to have failed. And so we are really looking at a situation where Congress actually does have an opportunity to possibly rebuild a number of institutions from the ground up, because the criticism that they always tell us is that we don't have the political capital. We don't have the ability to do it, right? Well, now there is going to be the political will, at least, in our society, to be able to do that kind of thing. And so we have an opportunity for the first time in a long, long time, guys, to rethink neoliberalism. We have an opportunity to rethink many of these assumptions that we've been just, going through, assuming that, neoliberalism was water and we were all just fish. That's just how the world is. I believe it was Margaret Thatcher who said that there is no other alternative, right? So the ideas that, this is the only way to go, that it's the end of history, as Francis Fukuyama put it, seems to be put into question now. And we have a fresh opportunity, really for the first time since the fall of the Berlin Wall, to rethink our political order. And I think that Noam Chomsky's insights here are right, they're accurate, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. If I was being honest, I'm slightly pessimistic, as I always am, I guess, but there's a slight part of me that thinks maybe, just maybe, if there's any good that can come out of this, maybe we can rethink the world. So anyway, that's the video. If you liked it, I'd really appreciate it if you hit the like button and consider subscribing. Thanks.